Good morning, PT on Ice. My name is Mike Eisenhart. I am the lead faculty for the APHPT set of courses, the Pop Health Division, and the CERT course, as well as the intro course. And it is Monday. Welcome to Monday with Pop. So we're going to get into a bit today, see how things can go. Let me get the timer started. I don't have any coffee. I was up a little earlier than usual this morning, so I didn't get to keep my trend alive here and have my sip of coffee, unfortunately, this morning. I feel a little bit lost now because I tried to get that back going, and I'll have to do that again next week maybe. But I missed you last week, and now we're back, and we're going to talk a little bit about courage this morning. So let me get my my stopwatch started so I stay on track. Hey Matt, good morning. So last week I think Allie did an awesome job. I mean, if you watch that video, she talked about sort of what is population health and some measures, things that you could start doing. And she did such a nice job talking about how the data of this is so important, right? Like you can't escape the fact that this is really about measurement. And it's really about the idea of understanding trends and measuring differences and changes and then guiding either individuals or groups. So what a great video. If you haven't seen that, definitely take a look. And it plays really perfectly into what I'm going to talk a little bit about today, which is this idea that this call for courage as professionals, like the role that courage plays in our day-to-day and in our future, right? So that's kind of what I want to get to. And there are really 3 steps to go forward on this, I think. 3 tangible things that we can do, and we can start today. Anybody can do this, right? This is not the kind of thing that you have to be, super well experienced. This is not the kind of thing that you have to have, a client with a population. I mean, you can do this starting today. So we're going to cover that. And I think the reason why this topic has kind of been floating around my brain and sort of, kind of came to words this week is because we had the combination of a lot of different things. I mean, it's been a tremendously exciting couple of weeks for me. I don't know how many people sort of know all of the various parts, but we've got a lot of moving parts in the stuff that we do. We've obviously got the proactivity side of things, which is just growing nicely and steadily, and things are going kind of how we hoped they would. I was following along this weekend as the team down in Tennessee was doing a corporate event and working with a client. There was just a lot of really cool energy. So I'm sure at some point, if you're following them on Instagram or Facebook, you'll see more about that. But there's just a lot there, and so you have that. And then on the other hand, last week I missed because I was traveling back from Graham sessions, and there was just a lot of good conversation there as well. So that kind of those 2 things kind of pushed me into this direction. And it does take a lot of courage in that kind of a setting. You're sort of surrounded by a whole bunch of people who are well-known, voices in the physical therapy world, at least. And you kind of have to step up and say your mind. And it's not an easy thing to do in front of a room like that. So there was that. And then on the other hand, there was kind of like this new group in the intro course here on the ICE side starting up. And it's a really great group. I mean, they are super active and lots of conversation so far. They're really, really working toward connecting the dots, and you can almost watch the wheels turn and people make these connections. And already within a week, they're talking about how they can apply it, how they can kind of get it working in their own place and in their own clinics and in their own experiences. So that was awesome. We're on to like week 5 of the current certification cohort, which is again the more advanced, one of the 3 advanced courses. So there are now kind of level 1 intro course, and then these 3 level 2 courses, one of which I teach, which is the CERT course. And then, of course, there's these other 2, one which Allie teaches, which is precision prevention, and then the third one, which Jeremy Fletcher, Megan Doyle teach, which is really this total lifestyle approach. And we're seeing all 3 of the themes from all those courses kind of permeate, and it's just kind of cool to watch. So it's been exciting. There's just a lot going on at all times. So today, the concept is, well, how do you take all that energy, all that good stuff that's happening, and boil it down into 3 things that people can do? Because that, I think, is really where the missing link seems to be. People seem to sort of get the big idea, and then when it comes down to how do I get this to actually go in my day-to-day world, they get scared, they get nervous. And I think Allie did an awesome job of showing how really pretty simple things can be used to move the needle forward. And so I want to kind of build on that and talk a little bit more at the personal level. And so I think there are 3 things, and it starts with this idea, I think that Jeremy has brought up in some comments before. He had a great post on Facebook over the weekend, and then also has mentioned to me multiple times in the past that there's a call for leadership. that as professionals, we need to sort of step up and lead. That we know we can do these things. We know we can have major downstream benefit, but we're not necessarily willing to leave our own little nest and silo and lead the way that we need to. And so I kind of been thinking about that and this idea of, all right, well, then what is the fundamental attribute that you need to lead? And I think one of them, I don't know if it's the only one, but one of them is courage. You know, it's scary out there. You have to be willing to push yourself forward. You have to be willing to be on the front end of the charge. And that takes a fair amount of courage. And I think there are really three things that we have to do if we want to get there. If we're willing to put that courage forward, there's no doubt we can change the trajectory of lives. I mean, we have the benefit of seeing this almost every day. Just amazing changes in people that are really profound and awesome. And it's been cool to kind of, see more and more of that as the conversation grows. But to kind of get there in our own day-to-day practice, we all need sort of three things. And I think the first one, they rhyme. I'm going like Johnny Cochran style here. It's really admit, commit, and then test it. Those are kind of, I think, the three things that need to happen. Admit. So the first thing, and this is a hard one, and I guess I'll start with the hard one right off the bat, and that is, as professionals, whether we do it externally or internally to start with, whether we just do it in a conversation in front of the mirror or with a trusted colleague maybe, or in a safe group, like the APHPT community, you have to admit that you don't know everything. Like, I'm going to pause for a second there, right? Like, I know that sounds terrible and like that sounds scary. Like, you don't know everything. You don't have to know everything. You can't possibly know everything, right? There is unknowable. There is such a thing. They're just unknowable. Like the you don't know what you don't know thing. There is naivete. We all have it, but we have to admit that. We have to be willing to say, hey, I just don't know. Like, I don't know all the answers on that, but I could go find out. Now, I think there's some attributes, some differences between people who are what I would call admitters, people who admit this, and people who don't, right? Admitters to me are people who build teams. And that's why I think it's so important. Because when you start by admitting that you don't know everything, when you start by saying, hey, I know nothing, but I'm willing to find out. I'm willing to find people who will help me connect the dots. Admitters are team builders. Right? We hear this thrown around a lot, this idea of team-based care, and that the conservative care professionals should just be part of the team, should be at the table. Like, I hear it all the time in different places, okay? But we're not willing to say, okay, you should be at the table, but how do you actually get to the table? What if you were to build the table? What if you were to invite others? So admitters are people who kind of build tribes without tribalism. That's a really, really important, difference. It's not, we don't build walls around the things that we do, but we build tightly connected groups of people who can do amazing things. Sort of like open but well-protected borders, if that makes sense, right? Like, yeah, you can come, you're welcome, come on in, okay? But the people around us are knowledgeable, committed, connected to the overall, right? They're surrounded by people who have lots of different diversity. I think that's a really key thing. The people who can't do this, can't do step one, are surrounded by people who are exactly like them all the time. All the time. It's PTs connected to only PTs, and they're only surrounded by PTs forever. Okay? It's PTs who shun other professionals who might have something to bring to the table because they're different. And if you're different, that's a threat. I can't have you around because that's threatening to me. It's PTs who want to go, loggerheads and hammer against physicians or DOs or chiros or acupuncturists or whatever it is. It's turf. Okay, that's someone who's not willing to admit that we're not doing this alone. That's key. Okay. On the flip side, the people who are admitters, people who are willing to admit that we don't know everything, they humble themselves. Okay, they're not self-aggrandizing. They're not egomaniacs. They're willing to have people around them. They seek out people with different knowledges and different opinions. They're surrounded by people of different race and ethnicity and different religions and different political affiliations and different genders. I mean, you name it. They are trying to build, diversity, inclusion. Why? Because that's what allows them to understand complex problems, and that's the world that we're in. So that's step one, admit. In a sense, it's kind of like your classic 12-step program, right? Like admit you've got a problem. You can't do anything until you get to the root of it. That's it. We've got a problem. Okay, and the problem is that we're trying almost to be like perennial teenagers. We're trying to think we know everything all the time, and we don't. So that's number one. Step two is commit. Right? Commit is the idea of deciding on something that is bigger than you and marrying it. Like, I don't know how else to say it. Right? I've talked about this before. Like, what are you willing to die for? What are you willing to go to the mat over? Is there anything in your life that's that important that you think you are willing to die for it? That it is critically important. You're willing to jump in front of the proverbial bus for it. Okay? Is there a cause? Now, you could call it your why, or you could call it your purpose, in life, or you're having a purpose-driven life, or whatever you want to call it. What I'm saying is that step two is committing, is finding that thing and going completely neck deep into it and saying, look, I am tied to this. Till death do I part. It's my life's work. And I will go up and down, and there will be ebbs and flows, and there will be days where I accelerate and days where I slow down, but I will always march forward toward that end. I think we have a real concern and scare in the world that we are today. Like, we're all afraid to deeply commit to something. Whatever that thing might be. Now, I'm going to tell you professionally, it's a cause, whatever, and most people know mine, right? But it's this idea of like diving in all the way to our bones, right? Like all the way deep, like your soul is in it, okay? So for me, it's culturally contagious disease. I used to call that non-communicable disease, but that's not accurate. It's not true anymore, and hopefully that name will change. But it's culturally contagious disease, including despair, okay? The idea that the killing of hope and unnecessary burden of what I would call isms, right? And Asians, tribalism, intellectualism, egocentricism, sensationalism, okay? The Asians, medicalization, marginalization. Those are things that, to me, those are culturally contagious diseases. And I'm committed, like, to my soul to fight through that. And I don't know, but I'm willing to die for the cause. Okay? That idea of you're willing to burn the ships, you're so committed that you will go up the mountain or you will die trying. I think we are missing that. In many ways, we're missing that in our culture. And it's one of the reasons why I don't think we currently lead. We don't currently lead because we're always trying to give ourselves an out. Like if bad things happen, if this doesn't go the way it should, or if it doesn't go the way I want, I can always duck out. Okay? I think that's the antithesis of courage. And we need professional courage if we're going to go forward. Okay? Now, I don't need to sort of harp on that. You can call it a lot of different things, right? Strive to be a level 5 leader. That's a shout out to Pete Trujillo. He sent me a podcast. It was awesome. If you're a Jim Collins fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Level 5 leaders. He talks all about them, right? They're for the cause. They're not the leaders we often think of when we think of leaders. We often think of leaders as these like awesome, amazing people. And a lot of the level 5 leaders that he talks about are people who just slogged it out because the cause was important. So that's the second one. And then the third one in my 2 minutes left, and maybe the most fun one, is the idea of test it. So this is the next step. I think we're so locked into this idea that evidence is everything, and that we have to have like incontrovertible evidence before we move on something. I think that's a terrible crutch to lean on, and we've got to stop doing it. Okay, we have to be willing to test things, and if nothing else, we need to test them on ourselves. Okay, we have to be willing, as I've mentioned before, tinker inwardly, test them on ourselves. Okay, why? Why is that so important? It's so important for a lot of reasons. A, we know empathy matters. How could you possibly ask someone to do something that you've never done or have no experience doing? Okay, if you don't know what it feels like to make a major change, how could you possibly ask someone to do it? How could you possibly say, hey, listen, I'd like to change the way you eat, or I'd like to change the way you exercise or move, or your sleep habits, if you've never done it yourself, if you don't know firsthand the struggles? Not only can you not do it in good conscience, but like, how could you honestly speak as an authority on that? Like, just because you've read it somewhere doesn't mean anything. You have to actually try it. You have to actually do it to be able to say, hey, this is kind of how it goes down. Okay. It also is what allows you to step into, as Ali has talked about, this data collection side. This willingness to say, listen, it's about the information, it's about the data. I'm pumped. Tonight I'm going to go on to the APHPT workplace, and we're going to talk about some of the data collection efforts that we've been doing at Proactivity. Some of the aggregation stuff we've been doing using wearable devices. Okay, this is amazing stuff. This is the kind of stuff that will allow clinicians, that will give clinicians a vehicle, okay, to step into data collection and be able to actually move into that population space. That's a big deal, okay, but very few are doing it. And I think that's also a big deal. Right, so for example, there's quite a bit right now about caloric variability, right? So we know variability in training, that's not uncommon now in our world. It was a while ago, right? Everyone used to always dose out the exercise the same way and follow a very simple linear progression. But we're now seeing in the world, we see it certainly with the guys on the fitness side who have released a thing on Remoms and how much of a nice uptake that is. People are talking about this idea of variability. Change things up, stress the body, challenge the system so that it bounces back stronger. Well, it's not only in exercise, right? We know on the other side of the equation in nutrition. I don't have to restrict your calories necessarily, but I can change how you dose them, right? There could be a day where you have only a few and there could be a day where you have more. There's my bell. I should shut up. Bottom line is that's an obvious example. At some point, I'll tell you about that test. I just finished running that test on Friday. I'll explain it to you at some point. But so far, I was pretty impressed. I mean, the data clearly bears out that there is something important happening there. Okay? That's something that I can now speak to. The first time a person comes up to me and says, what do you know about fasting? Or what do you know about the information? Now, what did I do after that? After I tested it on myself, I checked to make sure it was safe. I tested it on myself. And then I went back and I said, hey, you know what? Now let me go see what the science says. What does the literature out there say? So I don't want to go down the rabbit hole too far, but just understand this. We know that practice lags research by about 20 years or so. Okay. We also know that typical research lags the innovation, the actual innovators, by another 5 or 10 years. So we're talking about when it gets into practice, it could be 35 years old conceptually. If we ever want to get to the front end, if we ever want to be on the tip of the arrow, we have to be willing to innovate. We have to be willing to find new ways, doing things better that get more people. And of course, someday we can talk about and do it at a lower price point so that everyone can participate. Make it so that everyone can participate. I don't have enough time to go into all that. Just I'll plant that seed. But the key thing is this. We have to be courageous. At this point, right, where we're at in healthcare, this is the best opportunity we may ever see in our lifetime. It honestly might be the single greatest opportunity. And so when I see people get bogged down with the idea of, well, I can't do it because, and they give us all the reasons why. My boss says I can't, or I can't do it because, like the world isn't there yet, or I don't have a payer system that'll pay me, or whatever. Like, okay, that's great. There's lots of perceived barriers. Okay, I'm sure that anybody who's done something of any real value has said at one point or another, like, yeah, I have 1,000 barriers. But they had the courage to admit they don't know everything, to commit to their cause regardless of the barriers, to test it, and then move forward until they found a solution. All right, very good. I'll leave it there. I'm way over now. So thanks for hanging on. Here's the basics. It's only Monday. Admit you don't know everything. Commit to your cause. Like, commit wholeheartedly. Put your soul into it. Okay? And then start testing it. If nothing else, test it on yourself and model it for your community. You'd be surprised how far it can take you. It's only Monday. Have a great week. Make it count.